Into our cosmic federation, I bring unique perspectives about these fascinating entities from the formidable planet of Sol 3. Humans have intrigued us with their tenacity and unpredictability, which stem from their perilous planet origins. A whisper spread across the audience when humans were mentioned, prompting Zor to signal for attention. Shortly, I'll delve into their biological wonders, but first, a vital truth: there are no fixed laws in human biology and behavior. Patterns exist, but anomalies are widespread. Every corner brings a new surprise, a fact confirmed by the students' uneasy chuckles, acknowledging the formidable reputation of resilient humans. Zor continued, focusing on an unusual aspect of human anatomy that distinguishes them: their autonomic nervous system's significant independence. Inviting a student to discuss their species' nervous system, Zor then highlighted the differences with the human system. For them, conscious control over many physiological processes is limited, like an autonomous factory producing goods without detailed oversight. This automation frees up mental capacity for other activities, a critical survival trait on their dangerous world. Zor illustrated this paradoxical benefit with examples of human trauma resistance, their inability to self-diagnose, and phenomena like cardiac transplants. Gasps of astonishment and disbelief punctuated his vivid accounts, emphasizing the strange nature of human biology to those accustomed to interfacing with patients' nervous systems. Zor solemnly advised against such attempts with humans, citing the risk of overwhelming your delicate instruments. Instead, rely on human medical knowledge to overcome these physiological barriers. As questions started pouring in, Zor smiled inwardly, knowing the enigma of humanity would occupy these eager minds throughout their academic pursuits. Let's employ simple language to continue this narrative for about 3,000 words. Hello, students, I'm delighted you're here today. You've nearly completed your final year at the Broad Galactic Medical Academy, Dr. Zor began, pausing to observe the gathering of students from 15 diverse intelligent species comprising the known Galactic Federation. Many of you might not know me, so let me introduce myself properly. I'm Dr. Zor. For the past 4 years, I was part of the team that made first contact with humans and has worked to integrate them into our collective societies. At this, many students began whispering among themselves. Zor anticipated this reaction. Humans were still a novelty to much of the galaxy and a subject of intense debate and fascination. They originated from Sol 3, a Class 12b death world, and the wild tales circulating about and from them only reinforced the daunting image of their homeworld. The room soon fell silent again, and several students raised their hands, eager to inquire, as curious young minds often do. Please hold your questions for later, as my talk today will likely answer some of them but may also leave you with many more queries than before, Zor said, his slight smile triggering a ripple of nervous laughter among the students, who then lowered their hands. Moments later, complete silence returned. To begin, it's crucial you understand something fundamental about humans that applies to every aspect of their existence. There is no single steadfast rule that can definitively define or limit their biology and behavior. Yes, there are trends and commonalities, but there will always be exceptions that defy or completely shatter those norms. The murmur among the assembled students confirmed that many had already recognized this from the fantastic tales of the chaos humans could unleash. However, that's not my focus today, Zor clarified, signaling his intent to discuss a peculiar aspect of the human body that his medical team had noted after our species began sharing information. There is no formal term for it yet, so bear with me. You there, Zor said, pointing to a notably keen student a couple of rows back. Could you explain in simple terms how our nervous systems function? The student appeared briefly perplexed before replying. Our main brain communicates with and controls the rest of our bodies through nerves, directing each part on how to function for essential processes and any tasks we undertake. Zor nodded, signaling the student to sit. Humans have a system that also sends signals for basic bodily functions, but in their case, He paused, searching for the right words. Imagine if I asked the human the same question. Unless they had specialized training in anatomy, most actions for them are like flipping a switch, and the body reacts automatically, while our brains need to coordinate each muscle individually. Many students now looked utterly baffled by this alien concept. One student raised their hand and, when recognized, voiced their understanding. So, if I asked the human to simply raise their arm, they wouldn't think about extending or contracting specific muscles. Their brain would just instruct the arm to move, and it would happen without conscious input. An oversimplification, but essentially accurate, Zor confirmed with a smile, pleased by the student's astute summary. The only refinement is that for humans, the higher brain functions don't even need to formulate that basic instruction. Their motor control is essentially on autopilot. He allowed this revelation to sink in, as the room filled with murmurs of confusion again. I know it's hard to grasp, and trust me, I shared your initial disbelief. The reason it's so hard to explain is because their system is so autonomous that even humans struggle to describe it in detail. It's a very closed, opaque process for their conscious minds. A student raised their hand again, and when called on, offered an insightful analogy. So, you're saying that while we are akin to manually constructing each object from its base components, humans operate more like an automated assembly line. You input the desired product, and a finished one comes out without further input? Exactly, an excellent way to conceptualize it, Zor replied, impressed once more by the exceptional capabilities of this graduating class. Now that I've laid the groundwork, let me explain how this will impact your work with human patients. He tapped his tablet, dimming the room lights as a large display screen behind him flickered to life. You see, in addition to that opaque nervous system, some of their body's core functions are completely outside their conscious control. A prime example is their heart. The display showed detailed diagrams highlighting the human cardiovascular system. Humans refer to their heart as a smooth muscle, meaning it's an organ that operates with little to no input from their higher brain functions. It self-regulates based on variables like activity level. If a human starts running, for instance, their heart automatically beats faster to pump more oxygenated blood, but they can't consciously control or adjust that rate directly. They can only trigger physiological states that prompt cardiac changes. Zor paused, letting the students ponder this revelation about the human body's priorities and compromises. So, their inability to control something as vital as their heart's rhythm stems from this advantage of autonomous systems governing core processes. A studious voice called out, "Correct," prompting Zor to continue. This striking example leads us to consider the evolutionary rationale behind such an arrangement. Anyone care to hypothesize why the human body is configured this way? He pointed to a raised hand from one of the students, who seemed encouraged by their peers' positive reactions. Well, based on what you've explained about Earth's unforgiving environment, it must provide some key survival benefit, though I can't quite articulate what that edge might be. Wouldn't precise control over one's body be more advantageous for avoiding the myriad threats? An astute observation, Zor praised. In most circumstances across the cosmos, you're absolutely right. Conscious mastery would be preferable, but on Terra, the human homeworld, the conditions are so hazardous that a more improvisational physiology is better suited. He switched the display to show harsh landscapes, volcanic wastes, blizzard-torn tundras, sun-scorched deserts. On a death world where danger is omnipresent, spending precious time learning how to manually control every bodily aspect for each specific scenario is unviable. Their autonomous functions let them react instinctively, despite lacking full situational awareness. Another student raised their hand, likening it to a medical analogy. It's like being a general clinic versus a specialty hospital. The general facility needs versatile tools to handle any case that comes through the door, while the specialty place has optimized but limited equipment. A somewhat crude analogy, but you've captured the essence perfectly, Zor exclaimed, impressed anew. This autonomous system is a powerful survival tool, granting broad capabilities, albeit lacking in fine control. As Zor continued his explanation of human resilience, he knew he needed to pivot to a cautionary tale. There are, however, downsides and risks to this opaque physiology. For instance, can someone summarize how we experience and cope with pain signals? A student near the back stood to share their knowledge with the room. Our nerves relay pain sensations to our brains, which can then choose to deactivate or dampen those signals to a degree. But doing so compromises the operation of the affected area, and severe pain can outright disrupt our motor control of a limb. An excellent summary, Zor nodded. As you've no doubt deduced, humans do not have that option due to their autonomous nervous functions. They call it high pain tolerance, the ability to keep using and controlling injured limbs or body parts well past what we would consider intolerable thresholds. He queued up a shocking video example, a human soldier calmly treating their own shattered leg after a battlefield incident. This human sustained multiple fractures from an explosive force, yet remained mobile long enough to properly splint the injury. An incredible feat, frankly, fueled by their alien physiology. Gasps and whines rippled through the auditorium as the haunting footage played out. When it concluded, Zor saw a hand raised hesitantly. If the human nervous system can't detect things like fractures clearly, wouldn't continuing to use that limb risk further self-harm? Seems like a dangerous trade-off. You raise an excellent point, Zor acknowledged solemnly. More often than not, that is indeed the case. You see, due to their disconnected self-awareness, humans typically can't diagnose internal issues accurately. Beyond basic pain signals, more surprising examples were shown, humans completely unaware of tumors, nerve damage going undetected for years, and more. So, to circle back, why would such a risky, almost oblivious physiology evolve on their home world, rather than having more finely tuned self-diagnostic capabilities? Zor watched the students mull over potential answers, hands rising and falling as they logic through possibilities. After letting theories brew for a few minutes, he continued. The driving factor was simply life expectancy on Terra's death world. Early humans that could react quickly and keep functioning through injuries, while unable to pinpoint every ailment's root cause, had better prospects for survival and reproduction compared to any better self-aware models. He could see the grim understanding dawning on faces throughout the room at this explanation of humanity's harsh evolutionary pressures. One hand rose, and Zor acknowledged the student to voice their realization. So, you're saying this autonomous advantage emerged because ancient humans were more likely to die from environmental threats than from undetected illnesses or injuries? Zor nodded somberly. Precisely. In those early epochs, this adaptation maximized their chances of surviving each immediate confrontation, even if it meant accumulating chronic issues their bodies couldn't analyze. He sighed, letting that harsh truth linger before changing his tone to a more objective timbre. Of course, in their modern technological era, such bluntness ill-suits many health needs. However, there remain specific arenas where their unique physiology provides distinct advantages. The skeptical students seemed to perk up a bit at that caveat. Zor grinned inwardly before elaborating. One prime example is the human startle reflex. Many of you may have heard anecdotes about them reacting to apparent threats before consciously registering the stimuli, later admitting, "I didn't even see what I dodged." Nods and confirmation from a few students who had indeed encountered such baffling accounts. Zor's grin widened as he posed a rhetorical query. How could one evade dangers they have not yet processed unless their movement was entirely decoupled from higher cognitive reaction time? He let the students' own deductions provide the answer, taking pride in how rapidly this crop of graduates grasped such alien paradigms. After ensuring they had arrived at the conclusion themselves, Zor moved to wrap up his advisory lecture. There are two final crucial considerations for your future practices. With a tap, Zor displayed deeply unsettling footage, a harvested, disembodied human heart still pumping vigorously when provided fresh blood via medical tubing. This is not a visual deception you're witnessing. One of the most iconic examples of human bodily autonomy, their heart can remain operational outside their body cavity so long as its primitive control needs are met. Stunned silence drowned out the room as the video looped, the ghastly yet fascinating scene of humans treating such feats as unremarkable medical norms never failed to shock other species. After letting that impact sink in, Zor turned to the final critical point of his lecture. For those of you pursuing advanced neurointegrative credentials, I must issue an ultimatum regarding human physiology. His tone shifted, weighing heavy with lethal seriousness. Do not attempt to establish neural synaptic uplinks with a human subject, ever. The startled students hung on his every grave word. While this manipulation allows us to fully experience a patient's afflictions firsthand, critically aiding diagnostics, the human nervous architecture is too aberrant, too compartmentalized, and opaque. He fixed each one of them with profoundly sincere eye contact. Any effort to bypass those natural firewalls and piggyback their motor pathways would be catastrophic, akin to overloading your instruments directly into the plasma drives of a capital ship, thoroughly destructive for all involved. The weight of Zor's dire warning settled over the hushed assembly like a shroud. He allowed it to linger before offering a lifeline. Fortunately, over their long technical enlightenment, humans have devised manifold methods for scrutinizing their bodily functions externally, and any placement serving their medical needs will provide experienced human consultants. Cooperate closely with them as your singular connection. Scanning the sober, contemplative expressions, Zor knew his imperative had been heeded. These were exemplars of their craft. With a warm smile, he made one final remark. That covers the key advisories for tailoring your care to human patients, though I expect our continued cultural intersection to birth many more insights demanding open minds and diligent study. Chuckling wryly, Zor activated the exits. I've clearly provided you all with ample to think about already. If any have pressing follow-up queries, I'll remain to discuss further, otherwise, you are dismissed to further ponder and prepare yourselves for careers awash in diversity. Not a single student budged, appendages seeming to sprout from every row as curiosities deluged forth. Settling in for the long haul, Zor grinned widely. He wouldn't have it any other way.